I love these spaces because we can really talk about connectivities, differences, but interactions that intersect and interweave. And this is how I met Anthony Williams here with me, because through my film, Blurring the Color Line, when I went to film in Gulfport, Mississippi, where I didn't know I had relatives, we managed to stumble on this brilliant filmmaker, Anthony, part of the AJ Williams Media Production. So thank you so much for joining us today, Anthony, and being a part of my project, really.
Oh yeah, it was fun. I love connecting with other people, especially from, all across the country, all across the world, and other creatives. I just love being in the same space with, like-minded individuals.
Yeah, and I do believe in serendipity and how forces bring people together for whatever reason it is. So here we are.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So I brought you here because there are several things. First of all, obviously the connection to my film, and I always wanted to ask you about your views on my examination of race relations between the Asian and African American community. But at the same time, through working with you, helping us film in Mississippi, is that you enlightened me on this dark history, yet another untold history, I guess, from my perspective, is the segregation issues in Mississippi, specifically Biloxi, which you are, you've been working on as a big project. So maybe you want to start by, why don't we start by talking about you first? Like, tell us what you want us to know about you first.
Well, I'm a filmmaker here in Gulfport, Mississippi, which is right outside of Biloxi. Biloxi is more popular, but Gulfport's actually a larger city. But I live in Gulfport. That's where my office is set up. I do a lot of commercial filmmaking. So I'll, make commercials for local businesses and national organizations as well. That's where the majority of my work comes from. But I also do documentary films, and I was just working on a production with ITV in Jackson, Mississippi, about the prison system. But one of the projects that I just finished was a production about the Biloxi wade-ins. And if you can imagine a sit-in, a wade-in is kind of similar, but they were in the water. So that's kind of what that was all about.
So I've never heard of this term before, wade in. So for people who've not, and you said it, to kind of compare it to sit-ins, give us a little historical, like 101 context to how this started and how it's relevant to specifically to Biloxi that you're working on.
So here in Biloxi, there was a guy by the name of Dr. Gilbert Mason, who was a doctor here in Biloxi, and he was in college on the swim team. So when he came to Biloxi, he loved to swim. So he went to the beach to get in the water with his family. Well, upon going to the beach, this officer of the law came and told him that he couldn't be there because I guess the people across the street thought that it was their property. Obviously, the law in America says that the beach is public property. You can't own the beach in America anyway. And so they took it to the mayor of Biloxi, and nobody could give them a straight answer. So they took it all the way from that officer trying to get answers and all the way up the ladder, and nobody could give them a straight answer to why they couldn't be there. So he organized over 100 people to go to the beach to wade in the water, just go to the beach and organize a peaceful protest. Well, the peaceful side of it didn't happen. It got pretty violent very fast. And so that video that I made all about it is up on YouTube right now. And there's been a few different things about it. Dr. Gilbert Mason is not unknown, but he's not as known as he really should be because of this. And because of those actions, it got sent all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's now legal for anybody public to come to the beach. And that it's actually a really incredible story. And I actually got to talk to two people who were actually there at the wait-ins to do interviews for them for it.
Yeah. And that's the brilliance of documentary, is to access and to archive these voices that otherwise might go missing in history, right? And there's so many of these untold stories that we don't really realize that, and why we have almost a responsibility to do something about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm just thinking of the visuals of, first of all, a wait-in is such a powerful form of protest, like you said, as a sit-in, but how it gets brutally violent, and what that reveals about our country. Obviously, this is during the height of the segregation era, right? You're talking that it was 1960, was it 1960?
Yeah, there were two wait-ins in Biloxi. The first one was 1959, I think, and then the next one was 1963 or 64. I don't remember exactly. Don't quote me on those dates.
Yeah.
But in the second one was actually more peaceful. They were trained a little bit more. So when the officers came, or if a mob was to come like they did the first time, they were trained on how to take the beating instead of running away. Their whole goal was to get arrested so that they could take the case to the Supreme Court.
Wow. But to put yourself in that situation, to know the extent or the possibilities of whatever consequences is just, for me, unimaginable. So how did, with you researching this, and I don't know how much you had learned or known about this in your upbringing or in your education, but have these, to know and to want to reveal these disturbing histories, how do you think that's shifted your way of looking at our country's racial history? I'm sure it was already quite distinct in your world, but has it shifted it into another level of understanding?
Yeah, there's just, to me, it's just a shedding a light on how much history goes unknown. In the Black community, there is a month that you learn the same history over and over and over. In school, the month of February, you learn about Dr. Martin Luther King, you learn about Rosa Parks, and then you might learn, about, George Washington Carver or somebody like that. But other than that, you don't really learn the history of how it happened, what happened to make the freedoms that we have available, besides those three main influencers. And there are so many people like Dr. Gilbert Mason out there that really changed the course of history for, people in Mississippi specifically, that, I don't know, it makes you wonder how much other stuff is out there that we don't know.
Oh gosh. Yeah. No, really. I mean, that's a tip of the iceberg, right? And it's crazy because we're talking in today's 2022, things are still being unraveled. So many things are still not told. And how does that make you feel? I mean, in addition to being a filmmaker and having the power of voice and creating these content that are important to kind of disrupt these old narratives, like as a parent, because I know you have children, like how does that work with you? And if you don't mind sharing, like your interracial marriage too, and how that informs the way you communicate, racism with your children and your family.
Yeah, it does inform the way I communicate racism with my children and with my family. I know through this project and through some other events that have unfolded here nationally in America, my wife has really had her eyes opened up to, for instance, white privilege.
Where is she from again?
She is from Nevada.
Okay.
She was born in Utah, raised in Nevada for a little while, but then we both moved to Mississippi around the same age. So we have a really long history living here in Mississippi. Now, I will say that the coast of Mississippi, the bottom three counties, are not like, all of the other parts of Mississippi. As far as racism and all of that, we're really close to New Orleans. We're really close to Mobile, Alabama. And it's the Gulf of Mexico too. So we've got a lot of Cuban immigrants. We've got a lot of Mexican immigrants. We've got a lot of French Creole from Louisiana here. It's more of a melting pot, and it's never felt racist. And that is actually part of why it was so surprising for me to find out about that dark history side of the beach in Mississippi,
Right.
because there is a past of racism even in South Mississippi. Biloxi is the home to Robert E. Lee's old home as well.
Hmm. Huh.
So, there are symbolisms,
Yeah,
and there are ghosts of the past, the dark
absolutely.
history
In
that are
fact,
still here.
I just want to say that the one time when I did visit to film in Mississippi, Gulfport, my aunt took us to this crab festival down. What's the other town down? A little further.
There's Biloxi, Ocean Springs, Pascagoula, Pass
No.
Christian.
It's give me another one. It's a very white community, and they have I guess a quite a well-known crab festival in the summer.
Is it Long Beach?
No,
I don't know.
we drove, it was a couple of hours away. But anyway, so I went with my newfound cousins and my aunt, who I never really met before either. Speaking of silences, I just wanted to kind of insert that my Aunt Barbara, she is my grandmother's, I guess, niece, because it's her sister's daughter. I never knew about her because nobody mentioned her after she married a man from Mississippi, right? A Black man from Mississippi. Her whole existence in our family tree was basically kind of delineated. And I somehow found her through different connections. And that's how I ended up in Mississippi to interview her and her family. So they took us to that crab fest, and I'm going to try to remember what that name of that place. It sounded like French, something, oh, like a connective word.
Like Socher.
No.
I don't know.
It had like hyphens in there. Anyway, it was my first real impression of what it meant to be in a very kind of, and it's not just white community, right? I'm talking like you feel like it's a different kind of a white community. Like in this festival, they were all a certain type of like Trump supporter type white community.
Yeah.
And I felt the gaze. I felt the gaze from everyone. Of course, we looked different. It's like, okay, what's this weird family of Asians and Black mix? Like they couldn't, maybe there's just a genuine curiosity. But at the same time, these blatant stares from this kind of homogenous community staring at us and making me feel really quite awkward at a moment was striking. And when you say like these kind of haunted past that kind of trickle in, it was brought to my attention by my cousin Leanna. One of the stalls was selling these nice tea towels, and one of the motifs on the tea towels were cotton. And I did not connect, if she did not bring that attention to me, like, why are they celebrating? What is the significance of cotton in the South being emblemed, weaved into their towels? And I thought, wow, that's quite disturbing. So it exists in so many different layers.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you were asking about my interracial marriage with my
Yes.
wife. For people that are listening to this and not actually seeing the video, I'm actually very light-skinned Black. I actually found out that my mom is mixed because she just recently, I don't even think we've talked about this. She just recently found her birth mother, and her birth father's passed, but she would have had connection to find that. Her mother is white and her dad was Black, but she is like incredibly light. Like you wouldn't even know she has any kind of interracial anything.
Right.
But her and my dad had me, obviously, and so I'm very light skinned. But as far as like percentage wise, I really I'd probably be 75% Black, but I don't know.
But historically, what does that mean for people who don't understand colorism within the Black community? Can you kind of give a little,
Yeah, especially in Mississippi. Mississippi specifically had, and I think they might still have on the books, they don't necessarily follow it, but it leads to one of the things that had been talked about in the news a lot before, is like some of these racial laws that are still on the books that are just not implemented. But it was called the one drop law, one drop rule, one drop law.
Right.
Where if you had any sort of Black in your history line, then you had to mark yourself down as a Black American or African American. And what that did was put you in a category where you had to use the colored, you know, things that they had in those days. That law, I'm not sure if that law is still on the books or not, but yeah, that was a real thing.
Yeah, and so this connects to your project in kind of bringing out the darker truths of the Biloxi wait-in protest situation, and it also connects to my film in blurring the racial lines in context to not knowing that there were Asians in the segregated South. And so you mentioned like, okay, so you know, Black people couldn't drink from certain fountains or couldn't go to stores in the front entrance, you know, things that we take for granted today, because if we don't know that history, you know, we know there's a disturbing past, but we didn't know the nuanced kind of ways it affected people's lives back then. But do you think that, you know, we've really progressed that much today in terms of these racial tensions that you see?
We have, and I'll tell you why I think that. I think that because the physical objects of segregation are not there anymore. You're always going to have people, individuals that have those thoughts. And I think that the power to change the things that are out there still is in the power of the vote. So now we have the power to go out there and vote. Black people for a long time didn't have voting power, and now we do. And now we're learning it's taken a lot of time, but we're learning how to use that power. And I think as we use that power, we vote people in who don't have these old ghost thoughts, right? And then we start implementing systems, start changing laws, and things get better from there. There are obviously still major problems, but I think those are residual problems, and I think that we're on a right trajectory when it comes to that. And I think that's where the real change has happened, is the change in trajectory. It's not necessarily the change in outcome. So.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're hopeful on that. I mean, as complicated and troubling it is still today, but you know, I also have to think about, you know, I'm obsessed with the idea of silent spaces and what's not being said. And, you know, even though the segregation laws are not in place anymore, you know, even looking at your kind of short film on YouTube explaining the Biloxi, the bloodbath, basically, from that wait-in protest. You know, one of your interviewees mentions, you know, the segregated sidewalk, right? Where, you know, a Black person would have to kind of basically step off if a white person was coming in their way. And these are visual markers of segregation, but the invisible markers in the way things play out today in terms of like housing and education and violence based on color of skin, I just think that they're so, I don't think we've done enough. And so, you know, it's too big of a topic to unravel, but how do we in our own specific power and position can do something that will make a difference? So what is your voice, and what is it you're going to do that's going to make that change?
For me, I think my real power is in the storytelling. You know, I think telling these stories and shedding light on it. When you put light in a dark place, you know, the evil there has to go away from it. You know, it's like when you turn the kitchen light on in a roach infested house, all the roaches, you know, just leave. That's kind of the first step. And once the stories are out there, there's nobody can say, I didn't know about it. You know, then, you know, because people in general want to be good. They want to be good people. And so if you shine a light on an issue that is unjust, most of the time, if people want to be good, they're going to want to bring justice to that situation. And that's really where my heart is. I'm all about justice. And for a long time, the Black and brown communities have lived an unjust life within the white spaces. And that, America in general is predominantly white and has predominantly white spaces.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, there's injustices all around. And if I can help shine a light on those injustices,
Yeah.
I think they'll resolve, because, other people will want to help out. And, if I can help out in other ways too, then I'm very open to doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I support you through this. Good luck with that. I also, want to emphasize the importance of voice and us creating new content that's going to shift the narrative. So I guess my final question to you is really going back to my documentaries. How did you feel, kind of maybe understanding or working with the issue, the topic around race relations and the Chinese and Black relationship historically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think they really do share the same thread, the same interleaving type of thing. Actually, you mentioned the interview with Dr. Black in my documentary. He actually told the story of him going to one of the, Chinese like shops, because some of the Chinese people could pass as being, white enough or something like that. So not all of the Black people could like own stores or something like that. They couldn't, be in certain places. But some of the Chinese or Asian people could. And so this Asian family was able to own this restaurant or corner store in the wider part of the neighborhood. So I don't know. It's like, okay, it's a one drop rule, but there's
It's very blurry.
so much tension right in that spot. And then, me being mixed and my mom being mixed as well. I'm living part of that. And it, I know I can empathize with the brown story as well because of the way my skin looks, but I can empathize with the Black part of it too, because that's how I was raised.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's complicated. But like you said, you embody that. And it's really, really important to kind of come into these blended spaces to be able to shift the way of thinking and to see things on a multiple layer, that it's not just Black and white history, which has predominantly been kind of the way we've been learning things. So we need to kind of destroy that and rebuild with these very mixed narratives. And so I really appreciate your sharing your personal family context and this important project that you're working on. How can people learn more about your work?
If you want to see my work, you can go to YouTube and follow me there. AJ Williams Media on all platforms. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok occasionally.
Yeah, same. But great. Okay, so we'll share all that and when I will put this up. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing. It was a pleasure to work with you. I hope that we can have connected projects somewhere down the line, because there's so many more stories to tell.
That would be great. I'd love to connect with you and do some projects together. That'd be great.
Super. Thank you so much, Anthony.
All right. Talk later.